Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Stacy said, we're the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare, and we have been partnering with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office for a little bit less than a decade now on being able to look at the good work that's being done within the Be at School program, what people are doing to be able to help kids and families and to be able to support them. And we've done that both through some research, but also through hosting this gathering where people can come together in an interdisciplinary way to be able to learn from each other, but also to exchange ideas. And typically we host this in person, and we've been able to really kind of cultivate those rich discussions between educators and service providers and child protection folks to really understand the needs that kids and families are having and how we can best serve them in terms of getting them to school. As the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare is a research and training center, as Stacy said, we're located in the School of Social Work. So I extend a welcome on behalf of our school, as well as our College of Education and Human Development. This gathering is supported through funding from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, of course, and Hennepin Child Protection Services, Child Welfare Services, and is supported in a grant from DHS to CASHU, which is Title IV-E funds, so some federal funds that are supporting our education this morning. So thank you to all of those funders and all the folks that support this annual event. It's now my privilege to be able to introduce Mike Freeman. Mike is the Hennepin County attorney and has been so for cumulatively about 14 years, I think, right, Mike? And always shows up to our gatherings to provide a welcome and to really kind of help ground us in the work that we're going to do over the next couple hours. Mike?
Good morning, and thank you so much, and a special greeting to Amanda Harrington, our new director of the Be at School program, and our chief #1 person, Linda Ritchie, who has been with the program a number of years. Those two are designed and work full-time to make me look good, and that's not easy at my age. But I'm very excited about Be at School. The beginning of Be at School began back in the 90s during my first 8 years as county attorney, because I've always believed that a child who doesn't get an education is a child that's going to end up in the social welfare system or the criminal justice system, most likely. And, you know, every one of God's children deserves an education, just like food and clothing and shelter. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do to help on that. We are not educators, we're not social workers. We try to remember that. Not always easy, friends, because we like to think attorneys are Renaissance people who know everything, but we don't. But what we do know, and we are committed to helping get every child to school on time, every day, ready to learn. Your work is what makes it possible. And all of our work has gotten much more difficult because of COVID. Radical shift in how we did things. We worked with the folks in the schools and you all, and we found ways to get families more services earlier, which was really critical to do that. You know, folks say the only thing a kid needs is an alarm clock to get to school. Well, we know better. Research shows us it's a child's behavior, their mental health, and transportation. Sometimes it's shoes, sometimes it's lunch. Sometimes it's a parent who didn't have a very good experience in school and therefore don't consider it part of their responsibility as a parent to get that child in school. Sorry. State legislature says different, and we all know children deserve to be in school to learn things. So we're always looking to improve our program, but it works because of you all, because of your commitment to our kids. I just came back from the Net Lake Indian Reservation. Not too many people have been in Net Lake. It's 40 miles south of the Canadian border, but they're working and trying to make sure their kids go to school, and they have a program somewhat similar to Be at School to really focus and follow up. So this works, and it works because you care. So you care, and I care, and the people in the county attorney's office care. So have a good meeting. Thank you for letting me say hello again. I think it's about my 10th year doing it, but I'll do it as long as I'm county attorney. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us this morning. As Mike said, I am Amanda Harrington, the new program manager for Be It School. And for those of you who don't know me, I was a school social worker and mentor in Minneapolis Public Schools for 10 years before going to law school. I've worked with the county attorney's office for 2 years as an attorney, and now I get to combine all of those skills in this current role. Since you're here at the Be It School Summer Conference, I will assume that you know a little something about our program, but I wanted to highlight just a few things for you. Before the pandemic, during the 2018-2019 school year, Be It School received almost 20,000 referrals. I just want to sit with that for a moment because I didn't realize that before I joined this group. The Be It School team is small, it's only 8 people, and they handled 20,000 referrals in one school year. I want to point out that that is 4 times as much as our neighboring county, one of our neighboring counties. So that number went down during the pandemic to a mere 13,000 referrals, but none of you will be surprised that our work didn't go down. Families and students' needs were more complicated and they needed support for longer periods of time. And like all of you, we pivoted to do that work, and the work continued. We worked hard to provide the best support to families and students. So I really want to thank the Be It School team for all of their hard work during the pandemic. Like many of you, the Be It School team abruptly changed to working from home, some working with their own children at their side, caring for new babies or ill parents. The team worked with confused schools and frustrated parents and overwhelmed community agencies and county social workers. I also wanted to take a moment to reflect on the results of that poll that we asked you to take. So as you saw, we have a great diversity in folks who are present. The greatest percentage is county or tribal social workers. We also have school social workers, educators or administrators, so principals, other school leaders, other county social work supervisors or administration, and attorney, and a good chunk of other, which I'm super curious about what that is. But I just want to point out that this training is for all of you. It is school focused this year, but we know that all of us work together, and it takes all of us to work for the benefit of children and families. And so in addition to thanking my team, I want to thank all of you for partnering with us during the pandemic and going forward. School attendance is not the most glamorous topic, I know that, but if we can't at least get students into schools or logged into distance learning, there's no way that they can access all the important benefits of an education. School attendance is a first step to improving kids' futures. So we all hope that this school year will be different, maybe even better, and that's why we're here today, to talk about supporting and engaging students and families in uncertain times. First off, we will hear from the Minnesota Department of Education. We're incredibly lucky to have 4 representatives from MDE joining us today. Assistant Commissioner of Teaching and Learning, Bobby Burnham, School Improvement Program Manager, Dennis Duffy, State Libraries and Expanded Learning Division Interim Director, Sheila Orline, and Social Emotional Learning Specialist, Sabrina Winkleman. During the pandemic, MDE advised that schools should give families grace regarding attendance. And MDE representatives are joining us today to help us understand any new guidance around attendance and engagement for the 2021-22 school year. If you have any questions for MDE, please use the Q&A function. Conference staff will be monitoring for questions. And now I will turn it over to the Minnesota Department of Education.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Amanda for reaching out to us at MDE and inviting us to this important conversation and to participate in this conference in partnership with the Hennepin County Be It School Truancy Prevention Program and the University of Minnesota Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare. There are no more important topics to cover than what is facing our students, families, and school staff and the child welfare staff in Minnesota at this critical time as we work our way through recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. As we have seen and heard over these last few days, we are certainly not out of the woods yet, not by a long shot. So this conversation is even more important as we work together to support students and families through this uncertain time. And today, we are very fortunate to have 3 of our MDE staff with us who are experts in their field and who will be sharing with you some of the structures MDE promotes to increase student attendance and engagement, as well as promote the social, emotional, and mental well-being of our Minnesota students. First, you will hear from Sabrina Winkleman. Sabrina is a social emotional learning specialist with the School Climate Center, and she will be presenting on adult social emotional learning, which cultivates educator mindsets and ways of being. Attendance and school engagement start with the mindsets of adults. Cultivating adults' social emotional skills supports a whole educator mindset in service of a whole child approach. After Sabrina, you will hear from Dennis Duffy. Dennis is the School Improvement Program Manager and will present 2 resources that outline processes and team structures for supporting attendance and engagement initiatives, and will discuss similarities and trade-offs between the 2 models. And to end our session with MDE, Sheila Orlean, State Libraries and Expanded Learning Division Interim Director, will discuss ways schools and community partners can work together to support attendance and engagement initiatives that engage students and families during both the school day and out of school time. So with that, again, thank you for having us, and we look forward to a continued partnership and collaboration in this work, and I will turn it over to Sabrina.
Good morning, everyone, and I'll just pause a moment while we pull up the PowerPoint. Again, thank you for having us, and thank you again, Assistant Commissioner Burnham. I'm going to start this morning by talking about SEL, and I see that a number of you are social workers. So perhaps you have experience and deep knowledge about SEL. I want to begin by grounding us in a common definition, the one from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL. And a link to CASEL and the resources that I will be sharing will be included in the follow-up email from Stacy. So let's just all take a minute to peruse the definition on the screen. I'd also invite you to maybe jot down something that's resonating for you this morning. And again, I'm just going to pause for you to take a look at the definition and make note of anything that's resonating for you. And I do see that Stacy put the link to CASEL in the chat. So again, I'll pause as you read and jot down anything that's resonating. So I hope you've had a moment. It's only been a few seconds. I know for me, I can share that really the piece about advancing educational equity and excellence through all the partnerships is really resonating with me this morning as we're thinking about our attendance and engagement initiatives and how our mindsets as adults really support how those initiatives are developed and rolled out. So as you can see from the definition, SEL is really a systemic approach. And we're going to watch a brief video now that really explains the importance of SEL from a systems level. So, and again, we'll have the link to this attached in case you might want to use it in your context.
Think about the young people in your lives and all the different places where they're learning about themselves, how to relate to others, and work together on goals. How can we intentionally create learning experiences that will help all young people develop and maintain positive relationships, become lifelong learners, and contribute to a more caring, just world? Educators, researchers, community members, families, and the students themselves agree what we need is social and emotional learning, or SEL. SEL is the process through which young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect with others, achieve our goals, and support our communities. We all need opportunities to learn and engage in environments where we feel safe, valued, and a sense of belonging. So how does SEL help schools, families, and communities work together so that all young people have these kinds of learning experiences and achieve success in education, careers, and life? CASTLE's framework identifies 5 areas of competence that together help us develop a healthy sense of who we are, manage stress, understand the views of others, and work together to create schools and communities where everyone can grow their strengths and interests. Self-awareness is about how we think about ourselves and who we are. It includes understanding our culture, our thoughts, feelings, and what we believe we're capable of, and understanding how these things can influence our behaviors and beliefs. Self-management is the ability to manage those emotions, thoughts, and actions in different situations so that we can achieve individual and collective goals. This includes coping with stress and anxiety, persevering through challenges, and taking action to create positive change. Social awareness is how we understand others, how we learn to take different perspectives and empathize even with people who are different from us. It also includes understanding how the broader norms and systems around us influence how we develop and create a sense of belonging. Relationship skills are how we connect and engage effectively with others, and how we form lasting friendships and connections. This includes communicating clearly, solving problems together, managing conflict and disagreements, and standing up for ourselves and the rights of others. Lastly, responsible decision-making is how we put it all together to make caring and constructive choices. This includes thinking critically about consequences, analyzing the impact of our actions on ourselves and others, and identifying solutions that support our collective well-being. We continue to develop and practice SEL throughout our lives and can adapt and apply these competencies across different contexts and cultures. How we develop SEL is impacted by our environments, which is why we need to work together across classrooms, schools, families, and communities. In the classroom, students can be explicitly taught SEL skills and also can practice and apply SEL during core subjects, like discussing different perspectives in social studies and language arts, or collaboratively problem solving in science or math. SEL is most effective when supported by evidence-based programs and trusting relationships where students are treated as partners in their learning. Beyond the classroom, SEL can be intentionally promoted throughout the school experience, from the way they're greeted in the morning to how discipline practices are carried out and how adults themselves develop and model positive relationships and the SEL competencies. Outside of school, families and caregivers provide the earliest and ongoing learning and interactions for their children, so it's important that schools listen to and authentically partner with families to help shape SEL priorities and strategies for supporting their children. Similarly, when schools partner with community organizations to align their efforts, SEL opportunities can be strengthened and students benefit even more. With SEL, we can help create schools and learning spaces where all young people feel connected, inspired, engaged, and ready to contribute to the world around them.
So again, thank you for viewing the video. And as you can see, SEL is a systemic approach to transforming our learning environments And really the work begins with developing adult mindsets and ways of being. And so on the next slide, we can move there. I would like to offer a specific tool that you can utilize immediately to develop your adult SEL skills. This is the Adult SEL Self-Assessment from Castle. A link to the self-assessment will be added to the chat. When you and the other adults connected to learning environments explicitly and intentionally develop the SEL 5 competencies, you support your own whole educator development in service of a whole child approach. Your approach to attendance and engagement initiatives comes from a mindset and way of being that focuses on creatively problem solving the systems and structures that could be barriers to your initiatives. And we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so on this slide, you'll see a potentially helpful framework for slowing down and making space for explicit and intentional adult SEL development. And this is the 3 signature practices playbook. These practices include a welcoming inclusion activity, engaging interactive tasks, and optimistic closure. When we intentionally, systemically utilize these 3 practices, the learning climate shifts. These practices can also be utilized in the classroom and in micro ways. For example, when you have an interaction with a colleague, do you begin with a hello and a brief check-in? Does your time together involve mutual listening and connecting? Do you end your time together with gratitude, reflection, or an acknowledgement of how you'd like to connect in the future? And we can go to the next slide, please. So again, as we saw in the video, SEL is a systemic approach, and I've offered a couple of tools that you can engage in immediately in terms of adult SEL. I would also suggest engaging with the Reunite, Renew, and Thrive roadmap from Castle to support your SEL systemic goals. The Minnesota Department of Education was one of the community partners that collaborated with Castle to create this document. So again, thank you all. And I'm now going to pass to my colleague, Dennis.
All right, thank you, Sabrina, and good morning, everyone. My name is Dennis Duffy. I'm a program manager with the Minnesota Department of Education. I'm here to talk to everyone about 2 team structures and frameworks that we support and endorse in terms of supporting attendance and engagement. As you all know, taking a look at the folks who are on the call, based on the professions that are represented, you know that robust support for students requires dedicated personnel and systemic approaches. And schools must regularly use data to prioritize support, and schools need to act early before challenges become much more difficult and start appearing insurmountable to the folks involved. We're going to talk today briefly about 2 frameworks to approach this support. One is the Pathways to Engagement Toolkit from Attendance Works, which is a national organization I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, promoting attendance and engagement in school. The other is an example of an early warning intervention and monitoring system. In Minnesota, we affectionately call this Mirs, which is the Minnesota Early Indicator Response System. Take us to the next slide. As we get started talking about these frameworks, I want to really reiterate what Sabrina talked about and center the adult considerations here. As we're working with schools, whether you are a social worker in a school, an education administrator, or a social worker who or attorney who partners with schools, speaks to schools, but maybe doesn't work directly in a school district, we really want to make sure that these conversations are focusing on systemic barriers and systemic shortcomings when analyzing the data and identifying potential solutions. I was really struck as I reread the social emotional learning definition about the phrase responsible and caring decisions. You know, as we think about the role our schools have played and our professions have played with the communities that we serve, we really need to make sure that as we act on data and partner and support families, that we are really making decisions that are caring and empathetic and are centered not on deficits of the communities that we are perceived deficits of the communities that we're serving, but really focusing on the system itself. As we work with this, and I think this is a great place to bring this up, and my colleague Sheila is going to talk more about this, we really encourage schools and school systems to engage with resources and partnerships outside of the school district themselves. So partnering with the county, partnering with nonprofit organizations who have different perspectives and maybe have different relationships with the communities that we're trying to support. And again, I would reiterate, centering the 3 signature practices from SEL as the adults on these teams embark on the work. So as we start talking about the first framework, I want to center a little bit. If we go to the next slide, please. I want to center a little bit how folks might approach these resources. If you work directly in a school, I think this is something that you're going to want to, as the school year starts, do some investigation. Are these types of systems in place at your school? Are they kind of halfway in place? Or is this really not something your school is engaged in? If the latter is the case, I think that's something we're definitely going to want to build and support over the coming year. If you are in a profession where you are partnering with schools and districts, but maybe working a little more indirectly with this, I think this is something to work in the conversations as we talk about how to support students and families, and really getting a sense of, is this something that the schools you're working with have in place? If not, how can we get them connected with resources? So the first resource I want to point or direct people's attention to is the Pathways to Engagement resource from Attendance Works. I'm going to give the 10,000-foot overview of the resource, but there's a link in the presentation. I'm sure we can drop it in the chat so you can dive a little more into it. It is a pretty straightforward approach where there's an establishment of a team, which would include school administrators, social workers, teachers, nurses, community partners, to really come together, make sure everyone has designated roles, and look at attendance and engagement data and act upon what they see. And in the framework, it implores schools to review data at regular cycles and establish priority groups. It really highlights not just attendance data, but also the relationships that students and families have with the school. Contact information, we know that was a big issue over the last year where students and families would go missing and schools realized they didn't have up-to-date contact information for them, monitoring the status of that. The connectivity of students and families, not necessarily relationships with schools, but rather, do they have devices? Do they have internet connections? We're hoping that as we prioritize and transition back to in-person instruction, that connectivity will be maybe less of an issue, but I still think it's going to be an important consideration as we look at attendance and engagement. We also want to take a look at prior chronic absenteeism among students and really prioritize who has struggled in the past, who is the system not effectively reached and supported in the past, and then how can we support them going forward. After that, the framework emphasizes crafting engagement strategies. These are less interventions and more systemic approaches to working in tiers and really prioritizing which students need the most support and who is going to follow up with students and make sure they're getting the support they need. There's a great resource for establishing community and setting up appropriate communication and communicating families what to expect with the school year in this framework. So if you look in the resources, there's a whole section about how to get started with the fall. And lastly, there's an emphasis on reflecting, learning, and improving. So engaging in a continuous improvement process as your school or the school that you partner with engages in this work. As with any resources, there's certain things that I think work well in this and other things that I think should be reflected on. So if we go to the next slide, give some highlights from this. I would say some highlights for the folks on this call who are working with schools of this framework. This framework is specific to attendance, and I'll contextualize that a little bit when we talk about the next framework. But this has attendance in mind, and it is written with the COVID-19 pandemic in mind, and specifically how to re-engage students and create community at school. It has some helpful overviews on the makeup of an attendance team and the function and sample agendas. One thing that I think folks should be mindful of if they do take a look at this resource and start working with schools on it is the attendance related data points are helpful, but it was written with the 2020-21 school year in mind. Things may look a little different in the 21-22 school year, something to keep in mind. Next, I want to talk about an example of an early warning system, which is a framework that can be used to also monitor attendance and structure a team to respond to attendance and engagement challenges. If we can go to the next slide. So as I said, this framework is known as Mirs in Minnesota. It is a similar process to Pathways to Engagement, but as I walk through this, I think you'll see there's some different points of emphasis. It requires that schools establish a team. It requires that schools review data. Nothing different there. However, this was developed as a on track for graduation framework, although the evidence shows that it can support attendance. So the data that is being emphasized here is attendance, but also behavior, so discipline referrals, things like that, as well as course completion or grades. So slight difference in the emphasis on which data that we're using here. There is a step where schools must discuss individual students who, through the process of reviewing data, are coming up. And after the discussion of the individual students, interventions are assigned. Now, when we talk about interventions, we're not talking about, if folks are familiar working with schools, sometimes we're talking about reading interventions or math interventions. Here, we're specifically talking about, we see a student having a challenge, we need to try something. So kind of lowercase I intervention here. There's a step ensuring that interventions are provided and steps to ensure that student progress is being monitored in a timely way to make sure that students are getting the support that they need, or in the case where student progress is not trending in the right direction, those interventions that are provided are reevaluated. And of course, evaluate, refine, and report. Continuous improvement is at the heart of this. And without continuously refining what we're doing, these systems will not work as intended. If we can go to the next slide, I want to give some trade-offs with this model. This is a MDE resource, and we strongly endorse it for particularly keeping kids on track for graduation. It was built with graduation in mind. So as you read through the resource, it really has that lens, even though evaluations have demonstrated that schools that implement this do show an improvement in chronic absenteeism rates. For those who work with schools, this is aligned with the implementation science framework. For folks who are unfamiliar with that, that is a framework that a lot of our schools use to ensure that initiatives that they adopt get carried out with fidelity and are put in place as intended. So for schools that are familiar with that language, this resource will be pretty familiar to them, and they'll know what to do with a lot of the tools in it. I would say that the Mirs resource, more so than the Pathways to Engagement resource, has stronger resources for the team functioning and the monitoring of implementation. So if you're working with a school and that's really a point of emphasis, I think this might be a more helpful resource in that situation. I will say the recommended data points, again, attendance is included, but it's not as focused on attendance and engagement as the Pathways to Engagement framework is. And I will say there's a resource or a tool in this resource that has some suggested interventions. And I will say these are not aligned specifically to attendance, and this should be supplemented with some of the resources that you find in the Attendance Works toolkit. We go to the last slide here. My big takeaway before I pass it on to Sheila, you'll find as you review the resources and as you work with schools that review the resources, there's two steps in both models are pretty similar. I would recommend starting with the resources in the Pathways to Engagement toolkit. They're more specific to attendance and they're written with the pandemic in mind. That being said, the MDE's Mirs resource, even though they were developed under different circumstances, have some pretty helpful implementation resources, and the team functioning resources could still be beneficial to schools. With that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Sheila Orline. She's going to talk about community partnerships.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm Sheila Orline, and I am going to talk a bit about some strategies. So Dennis talked a bit about strategies that would create community at school, and I'm going to talk about ways to bring schools and communities together to meet the needs of parents and families. You might recognize the image on this slide from the video that Sabrina shared at the beginning of our presentation. Looking across all of the settings, I'm going to focus on the community settings, that outer ring, and talk a bit about strategies to implement school community partnerships to support attendance and engagement. Community organizations are uniquely positioned to provide some of this support. On the slide, you'll see some examples of that. First of all, they're usually closest to understanding what the community needs are. They're often trusted by families. They are because attendance or participation in a community-based organization's programs is typically voluntary and not compulsory. The relationship there is based on trust in ways that relationship might look differently in other settings. And they are spaces and places for young people and adults to practice and apply social emotional learning skills. If we could go to the next slide. So trusting and collaborative relationships was included in some of the definition language of Sabrina's first slide. And those are the sorts of trusting and collaborative relationships are at the core of building effective partnerships. When working across the school and community partnership in any setting, and I mean could be community-based organizations, it could be counties, it could be libraries, it could be even within a school district working with their community education department. Anytime that this relationship is being built in support of providing resources and programmatic support for students and families, that relationship between the partners needs to be tended to and supported. And some of the indicators of an effective school community partnership are ensuring that you are clearly communicating both what it is you're talking about and how you make decisions together. So having that documented in some way is a really important way to ensure a successful partnership. Having conversations about a shared mission and vision for the collaborative effort, clearly defining what is in scope, what is out of scope, what is the vision of this partnership's, what does success look like, and being able to talk about that and anchor everyone to that is a really important step. As is defining expectations and indicators of success. So if it is an initiative, a partnership that is intended to support engagement and increasing school day attendance for students, how do you know if it's working? And then having joint staff meetings and shared professional development opportunities is a great way to sort of put that partnership into action. If we can go to the next slide, I have a couple of examples of ways in which some of those practices have been put into place. So the first example is around PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. It is frequently a school day initiative. And I have an example in Greenway, Minnesota, where the school district decided to implement a district-wide PBIS program, but it didn't stop at the school doors. They reached out to their community partners at the public library, at the Boys and Girls Club, through their community education program. They included cafeteria staff, school bus drivers, things like that. And they got everybody on the same page by providing training to every student, or I'm sorry, to every adult in those settings to ensure consistency across. So that what was happening in the community and what was happening in the school were grounded in the same approach. Full service community schools is a great example of putting that school community partnership in practice through shared mission and vision, and bringing the community into the school by providing opportunities for some of those trusted services that families take advantage of. For example, in Northfield, they are working on a full service community school in one of their schools, where they have opportunities for the community partners to come into the school. Some parents feel hesitant to come into the school building, or their schedule won't allow them to come into the school building during the school day. By partnering with the community organizations and providing those services inside of the school building, it helps build that bridge between the school day and what's happening in the community, and helps build those relationships and trust. And finally, I'm going to use expanded learning opportunities, which are intentionally designed program opportunities, intentionally designed to support the social, emotional, and academic needs of students outside of the school day. So that would be a great example of defined expectations and indicators. In many of these instances, the partners providing the expanded learning opportunities are working to intentionally complement and reinforce the academic program of the school day, and so engage in joint staff meetings, meet frequently with school staff to understand the curriculum and the academic standards that are being met by the curriculum, to ensure that the program practices that are being implemented outside of the school day complement and reinforce that. There was a recent study, the Minnesota Department of Education's 21st Century Community Learning Center program was recently was a recent participant in a national study that showed that students who attended a high quality expanded learning program, or in this case, a 21st Century Community Learning Center program, the students improved on a variety of social and emotional outcomes, which we were expecting to see, and so those increases and improvements on social and emotional learning skills also was associated with increased school day attendance, as well as improved math and reading scores on MCAs. And those findings, those increases were found to be statistically significant as well. So there's just a lot of ways to sort of take this whole community approach and linking the school and what's happening in the classroom through all of those circles on the image from my first slide, and from Sabrina's Sabrina's video, to talk about ways that these conversations can flow back and forth across the school setting and the community setting in an effort to support and meet the needs of students and families in Minnesota. And with that, I believe we do have some time for questions.
Thank you, Sheila, and all the presenters. We do have a couple minutes for questions. If you'd like to put them in the Q&A, some folks have already done so. I see there was one question that Dennis answered about the Mirs frameworks. So Dennis, I don't know if you were able to answer that just for everyone as well, an example.
Yeah, I can go ahead and verbalize it. So there was a question about how the Mirs framework is utilized. I would say typically right now it is used, specifically we work with it a lot in schools that are identified in our federal accountability system. They tend to be high schools, and they tend to be high schools working on improving graduation. That being said, the framework in general would help a school, if they don't already have an established team, to look at attendance and other engagement indicators. And if they don't have an established way to collect that data and analyze it, I think it would help a school set those things up. I'm not sure if that's quite what the question was getting at. If not, please drop it back in the Q&A. I can clarify further.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Let's see if there's any other questions, and otherwise we can transition. Looks like most of them were answered in the Q&A throughout the presentation. So if you do have any other questions throughout the presentation, though, even if it's related to MDE, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. And let me see, I think we might have gotten one here. Well, we have time for one more. How about this one? What is MDE guidance on attendance for this school year? Anybody from MDE want to answer that one?
I would, Bobby, if you're on, I think you might be in the best position to speak to the current guidance on attendance. I can speak a little bit about what we talked about last year, but it has changed a little bit.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
MDE's guidance for the coming year on attendance.
So yeah, we set direction and provided guidance last year, given the current circumstances. And as we move forward with this year, we are moving forward as if everyone will be in person learning, and we will be adjusting the guidance as needed, given the situation with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Bobby. And so now we actually are going to hear from school leaders about that topic, but specifically around how to engage young people and families as they get back to school this year. And so Amanda is going to facilitate a panel. We're really excited to have folks here today to share their experiences with you and some of their plans for next year.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you to everybody from the Minnesota Department of Education. It's really important to make that connection between attendance and engagement. It's not just about what we used to call in the schools butts in seats, but it's actually about the quality of engagement that we're having with students. So I think we're going to get to more of that with our panel. And Maury, if you can turn on your camera as well, that would be helpful. I'm not sure if we need to make Maury a co-host so she's able to do that. But while we are getting Maury set up, I wanted to, thank you for the participants' patience. There we go, and now I can see Maury, welcome. So I wanted to just start off by asking all of the panel to introduce themselves, because you come from very different places. So if you can say your name, your school, and something briefly about the students that you serve, that may be geography or grades or socioeconomic status, kind of whatever you think it's important for us to know as you share your perspective. Tanya, why don't you go first?
Hello, my name is Tanya Allen. I am the Director of Mental Health and Family Engagement for District 287, which is the intermediate district that serves students from 11 different member districts along the western edge of Hennepin County. So Robbinsdale, Osseo, Edina, Eden Prairie, Richfield, several other districts. And I was previously the principal at North Education Center when the pandemic began, and that's located in New Hope. Of the students that attend, because we also have a part of our programming is care and treatment, as well as we also have an online school, but most of the students that attend our 4 big, larger sites. About 60% of those students are students of color, and socioeconomically speaking, it depends, it varies from site to site what that looks like. Some of our sites would have qualified back in the day for free breakfast and lunch, and then now that everybody it's a little different. And like I said, geographically speaking, one thing that's different is that students can open enroll into our member districts. And so we have students from Minneapolis Public Schools, but we also have students that are all the way out because of our open school choice programs that are all the way out in like really far places. So we serve a kind of wide area because of that issue. So I'll turn it over to someone else.
Great, thank you. And Carl, do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you, Amanda. My name is Carl Schleder. I'm Executive Director of Seven Hills Preparatory Academy. We are a K-8 charter public school. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary here this past year. We have campuses in Richfield and in Bloomington, and our story really is one of growth and expansion, merging and moving. As our flagship school started in Bloomington, our middle school outgrew that space, and so we moved to a campus in Richfield and then replicated our elementary program in Bloomington at our Richfield campus. And so we have 3 sites, a K-5 program in Bloomington, a 6-8 program in Richfield, co-located in the same facility as our K-8, K-5 programming in Richfield, excuse me. So our story also is one of intentional, celebratory, diversification of our school community. When I arrived at Bloomington 10 years ago, we had approximately 15% of our students and families of color. And our Richfield replication site now is 65% students and families of color. And our free reduced lunch population at our Richfield replication site is approximately 40%, with about 15% students with IEPs and 15% students receiving EL services. So I want to take a moment too to thank Amanda for including Seven Hills as a representative of charter public schools on this panel. We certainly can't speak to the many and various charter public schools across the state, but I will humbly, alongside Tanya and Ellen and Mari, offer what I can with respect to our strategies for engaging and supporting students and families and making sure that our community is a safe, brave space for them in the year ahead.
Thanks, Carl. And it was really important for us to have voices from larger districts. Minneapolis is always important, but we wanted to get the further out districts as well as that charter voice. I'm so glad you could join us. And Ellen will be able to speak to that a bit as well. Do you want to introduce yourself?
All right, thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Vanden Brandon, and I'm one of the Deans of Instruction at Hiawatha Collegiate High School. We're located in the Longfellow neighborhood of Minneapolis, and we are the high school of the Hiawatha Academies Network. So we serve about 650 students, grades 9 through 12. And I think something about our campus is that we make a promise to students and families that 100% of our students will graduate with post-secondary options. So whether that's enrolling in a 4-year school, a 2-year school, or the military or technical training services, we make a commitment that students graduate with post-secondary plans set up, and we have programs to support. And so our students largely come from South Minneapolis, Richfield, also the North Side, and we're looking to expand more into inviting students from St. Paul to join us at Hiawatha Collegiate High School too. So also super honored to be here today and excited to hear from our other school leaders too about their strategies for engagement, because we know how important it is that students and families feel like school is a reliable place to come to during this upcoming school year.
Thank you, Ellen. And Maury, you've been in front of this Be at School conference before. You're well known for your work doing student engagement. So, but just in case people haven't heard about you, do you want to introduce yourself and your school?
Absolutely. So my name is Mari. I know the U is in there to just kind of throw people off, and Maury comes out pretty quickly, but it's actually Mari, Melander Friesleben, and I'm a mom. I have 4 daughters, so there's a lot of estrogen in my life. 3 are grown and out of school and college, and my baby is here with me at North Community High School, where we serve 9th through 12th graders. We are definitely the blackest and dopest high school in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are unapologetically Black and embrace it, run with it, and definitely lift it up and herald it. Miss being, with you guys in person. The last time I was with you guys, we got to have snacks and beverages and all that fun stuff. And now we're online, which I feel like makes already super white spaces even whiter. And so I feel like this is a really white space to talk about some non-white stuff, if people are open to it, but happy to be here and try and get some of those concepts in the room.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. So I have a lot of questions for all of you, and we don't have as much time as we probably could take to have this conversation. But I wanted to start off by talking about getting kids back in person this year. Kids and youth, right? They're not all kids. So I've had conversations with most of you about this, but I would like you to share what you're doing to encourage students to get back into your physical building this fall. And because we don't have the opportunity to do much larger participation, I also want to encourage other participants to reflect on this in the chat. So feel free to tell us what your school might be doing to get students back this fall. And Mari, since we left off with you, do you want to start us off on this?
Yeah, I can absolutely start off. I would say that the way that I think it was Sabrina from MDE opened with adult SEL is also where my mindset is at. I have felt really strongly over the last year and a half that if life right now, post-pandemic, middle pandemic, whatever you want to call it, along with the trauma of the Memorial Day murder of George Floyd in 2020, if life was kind of like a bullseye, those of us that are closest to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that are closer to being Black in Minneapolis, Minnesota, are right smack dab in the middle of that bullseye. I think all of us are triggered beyond knowledge. I think that in about 5 or 10 years, psychiatrists and psychologists are going to have a heyday with all of our diagnoses. And post 2020 and 2021, PTSD that's going to have its own names, symptoms, and various possible solutions. And so I think I am deeply concerned about the emotional well-being of the adults in children's lives right now, and including parents, which I remind myself and my colleagues of all the time, that we don't have no control over parents. So stop it, right? Every time we start talking about it, and I have a couple of my colleagues, Kathy and Sam, on the line that hopefully can attest in case I start to fool you guys and not talk my walk, but can't control parents. And so their levels of emotional well-being are outside of our locus of control, but ours are not. And so ensuring that we are being fully upfront about our own self-awareness and whether we are able to self-manage, really pressing into those 5 competencies. I'd highly encourage everybody on the call. Our superintendent has been with us in our district for about 6 years, but when he first got here 6 years ago was when I first heard the term CASEL. To be quite honest, I'd kind of heard it before, but I didn't really dive into it. And over the last 6 years, I have fully embraced it, and it has turned into a staple for me. I would tell you that in bringing the staff back and in preparing to bring the children back, my focus has been on grace and ease and flexibility and being kind to yourself. I learned a life lesson from a monk one time who said that starting with yourself is who you need to start with being kind to. So being kind to yourself and bringing people in with an amazing amount of grace and patience and kindness and goodness, and all of those things has become really important. Also doing the same for students and families. We put out on, a lot of people are sharing their school supply lists, and we put out to our families yesterday that there's only one thing on the school supply list for North High, and that's your baby. So that's it. We'll figure out the rest. Okay. We're not going to stress. And so just kind of continuing to have that same mentality of what are the things that we can let go of. School supply list is one of them. If you want to go to the Target aisle and school supply aisle because that's what you want to do, you go right ahead. But you just bring your baby here on the first day of school. And Polars, you just worry about you coming and we'll figure out the rest. And so those have just been kind of some approaches that we've started to lead with this fall.
Thank you, Mari. That's great. I appreciate that. Ellen, when you and I spoke, you had mentioned that your high school is actually over-enrolled for this coming school year. So I don't know if you are concerned about getting students back in the building, but what are you doing around this?
Yeah, well, one thing, I don't know if other school leaders are experiencing this too, but the supply chains right now are also very backed up. So desks we ordered in April are not guaranteed to arrive in time for the first day, but we're going to make it work. Something I love about HCHS is we do an advisory program. So when students enter as freshmen, they're put into an advisory. We have single gender and mixed gender options. And your advisors are teachers or paraeducators or other staff members, social workers in the building. And you stay with your advisory for all 4 years of your experience at HCHS. So advisors, we like to think of as kind of the bridge between school life and home life. So when we do quarterly conferences, students and families aren't necessarily meeting with teachers, they're meeting with the advisors. So you've got a consistent face and support for all 4 years. You get to form deep relationships between the students and families in your advisory because you know them for 4 years. And so our staff is back now. Our first day was yesterday. And we have 2 back to school nights planned starting next Monday and Tuesday. So next Monday, we'll invite 9th and 12th graders into the building and families, and then Tuesday will be 10th and 11th. So we've started that communication with families at the end of July, just sending out flyers, emails, texts, website posts about remember back to school night is on these dates from these times. And the way we approach advisory and conferences and back to school nights is we expect 100% of parents and families to attend and students. And so we shoot for that goal. And if we fall short, that's okay. But we really drive to saying that we believe that 100% of students and families want to come in to hear from their teachers and school leaders about what to expect for partnership for the year. And if we can't, if phone calls don't work, we find a third way. We do home visits as well. And so I think we're starting small with the first time we're inviting students and families back is back to school night. And we're channeling resources and efforts to having a touch point with every student and family prior to those nights to say, you matter, we want to see you, here's what you can expect, here's what you'll hear from us. And hopefully students and families leave with a clearer picture of what the first day of school looks like. They've had a chance to share some of their concerns and questions that maybe a phone call or maybe an email isn't good enough. They want to talk with an actual human about to share the things that are on their minds. And then we'll also be offering a mobile vaccine clinic at any of our back to school nights and conferences too. So students and families have the option to get a first dose of a vaccine when they come to us as well, with follow-up promised too. So really, I think, leveraging advisory, the core of advisory is relationships, and then getting some concrete dates on the calendar saying, we can't wait to see you. Let's start there.
Great, Ellen, thank you. And Carl, the back to school nights, the open houses came up when I was talking with your team as well. And we were kind of talking about how some families might not be comfortable necessarily coming to a giant back to school gathering. And your team had talked about how they were addressing that.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you. And those are great strategies, Ellen. And, first, I want to just speak again to what Mari said about preparing our adults for that back to school night, right? We want to make sure that self-care is a component of our fall staff workshops. And so we'll have our counseling staff leading some sessions around wellness among our staff, right? Because we've got to make sure that, we can give the best of ourselves to our students and families, and not just the rest of what's left with ourselves to give them. So our back to school, we have about 1,150 students, and about 25% of those families were enrolled in distance learning all of last year. So we want to be especially mindful of those families who may still be anxious about returning to school following, the past year of not being present in our school communities. So we're going to do a few things. At our 6th grade, we had a 6th grade summer social that precedes the back to school night. And that's just an opportunity for our 6th graders, parents, parenting adults, families to come together and be with one another apart from all of the additional stresses 6th graders might have as they, face middle school on that first day. And then our back to school nights, we actually expanded them. It used to be a day, now it's a day and a half, and there's a part of an evening as well, so that we could stagger when our families and students are coming into the building. Part of that is just a general safety mitigation, but also to create a more supportive, less anxious experience for our families, and especially those families who were in distance learning last year. And we've been sharing out communications with our families. We'll have some of our elementary school teachers in advance of back to school open house send out either handwritten postcards or electronic postcards to their kiddos who are coming back. And with our 6th graders, we're kind of reducing the number of families we haven't heard from yet regarding their intent to return. And following some events and some emails and some outreach, we're placing phone calls to those students and families so we get a better sense of whether or not they are returning next year. I would just add then to what Ellen said around our programming that we'll have set up and review with our families at back to school open houses. And it'll be again reinforcing our 2nd step morning meeting program in our elementary schools, and then our developmental designs daily advisory at our middle school. And then continuing a CARES mentoring program where we have some really remarkable staff step up and volunteer and choose one student to mentor throughout the entirety of the year. And so that will be another way that we can connect our teachers and staff with our students in a very individual, kind of intimate, supportive way throughout the year ahead.
That's great, Carl. Thank you. And Tanya, round us out. What's 287 doing?
Well, one thing I forgot to mention about 287, so we serve pre-K through transition age students, and most of our students are setting for special education and an area learning center program. So there's students that have already had challenges with attendance and a lot of the issues that were brought before COVID happened. And so it just became more profound. And to pick up with what Mari was saying, one of the things, I'm fortunate to be in a district where our superintendent invested a lot in SEL. When I first came in here, we were working with Castle and using a lot of that, and we have an SEL coordinator. And one of the things we're doing because of the adult needs, all last year we work with Resma Menicum around a year of learning around looking at trauma and dealing with it from an adult perspective, because if our adults aren't well, it's going to be very difficult for them to then do what they need to do with students and with families throughout the year. So we're convening a work group next week, actually just to address SEL, not only for adults, but really focusing on what are we going to do for students as they come back. We're going to an event in one of our communities that happens to be happening this weekend. So we'll be doing a booth there, and we'll also be really working on doing home visits again. Last year during COVID, we were doing home visits. They were outside, or they'd meet everywhere. Our team would just meet at different places to really try to help and support our families and our students. And one of the things that we found really helpful, just given our ALC is probably were most impacted, I would say, during that pandemic. We lost a lot of students, and just concerns about where are those students, because all of them didn't end up back in their home districts. So one of the things we've just been intentionally doing is actually pulling our data on who we've had in the last year and a half, and then being really strategic about going after those kids any way that we can in terms of contact information, things like that. We've done those come to us kind of things, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. We just don't have a population that's always going to come to us. And transportation is a barrier when you serve 11 districts and you're being asked to go to one of 4 sites that may be 15, 20 miles from your home. So we've really just mobilized our team to really go out and be intentional about finding the kids and really helping to support them with whatever is going on right now so that they do feel comfortable about returning. We've been on the fence about how to do the vaccine piece, because really want to honor and respect that there's many BIPOC communities that are just still not doing that. And I don't, as a Black woman, I don't feel comfortable forcing anyone to make that decision. That's your personal choice and decision. So it's really been focusing on really trying to remove any barriers that exist for students to be able to get back in school, whether they've been gone all of last year, whatever that issue is, to try to really help reconnect. And our team has been really good at connecting with, whether it's connecting with friends of friends or other strategies to really get to the kids, and also make sure that our adults are doing well through adult LCL.
That's great. And all of you really have kind of talked around some of this same piece, that it's not just enough to get the students back in. There's a whole different tone that we need to set for this year, a different way of engagement. And so, we know that there's a bigger issue of recreating a sense of community with our students, the families, and the staff. We've all mentioned staff here as well. And so in my conversations with some of you, you mentioned that there's some students didn't return to your physical building at all last year. Same with staff. Some of them worked from home all year. So I'll open this up to whoever wants to go first, but tell us what your team is doing or will be doing to foster that sense of community again with everybody. And for participants, again, feel free to add your comments on this in the chat. So who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go first. I think one of the things we've been just trying to do to foster a sense of community is our school leaders have just been really intentional about being really real and listening to what's going on with staff and with families. Because of everything going on, there's obviously right now a lot of people are calling, trying to figure out what are we doing, what are we not doing within the districts. And for us, we have an emergency meeting this week, so we can't give concrete answers at this point on some of the things that families and students want to know, and even staff want to know. So I think part of what it is just peeling back and looking at how are we doing everything this year? How are we changing? Even myself, I was like, I'm not jumping into creating this presentation because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks before our quote workshop week comes. But I know that I need to be responsive to what's happening. As Mari mentioned earlier, one of the presentations I always did was this considering trauma piece. And we talk about trauma and we talk about the impact. And when you think about the collective trauma that people are experiencing, thinking about staff that are working and students that are living in those communities where they were directly impacted, whether it was in South Minneapolis or whether it was in Brooklyn Center. You can't just carry on as if things aren't happening. We tried to have some affinity group sessions with staff. They weren't always during their duty hours, but we tried to accommodate to the best of our abilities, because those are things that are really impacting people and how they're showing up. And so in order to build that sense of community, that's what we've been doing, is really just being much better active listeners to what people need, and then trying to figure out what can we respond to. We can't respond to everything, but what are the things that we actually can change our system and actually respond to? And part of our mantra in 287 is that we're responsive, innovative, and solutions oriented. So we really have been just trying to live that out in the past year and a half in as many ways as possible. But I would say that we've just been really flexible and working to listen more rather than just throw out a whole bunch of different things at people and at families.
Tanya, I feel like you took the words right out of my mouth in terms of, doing a lot of listening to staff, students, and families, and being responsive. Because I do think, our staff is here now, and we're talking about, revisiting our mission, vision, values, talking about goals. And it's good to talk about like the grounding things that we all agree to, but then knowing that the pathways to achieving those things have to be responsive to where people are authentically showing up each day, because it might be different on Monday than it is on Friday. So for our leadership team, I think it involves a lot of listening and a lot of patience, and making sure we're not letting like the white dominant cultural norm of urgency usurp putting humanity first, because we want to go far, not just fast. And then I think the way that we as a staff can model that for one another, we believe will trickle down then to how our staff respond and listen to students and families too. Like, we know content and learning is important in high school, and it's important that we are genuinely listening to what our kids and families say they need when they come to school, because it's more likely that they will come back and feel connected to community then too. And then I also think it's important that I think our staff is trying to find like, what are the rituals we can enact that put small celebrations, that prioritize celebrations too. So small things that feel like, we can celebrate that, or like, let's take time to say that this is something we feel gratitude to one another for, because I think that the overwhelming uncertainty that can come with trying to plan and plan for another school year during the pandemic can be counterbalanced also with small things every day to celebrate, and kind of ritualizing that as a staff, I hope makes it feel part of culture for team, and then allowing that to show up in your classrooms too. How do you find the small ways to celebrate authentically every day, in a way that doesn't feel like false or like toxic positivity, but something to remind us that there's a balance, and we can maybe build community around that.
I can go next. I just feel like you guys are super smart. I'm like, these are super smart people. And so I agree with what has already been shared. I would add that an ongoing priority to foster a sense of community amongst our teams is mutual accountability. And I like the term that Ellen used, toxic positivity. I try really hard to keep my thumb on the pulse as much as possible of, how people are feeling, what they're saying, formally and informally. I go in my own personal season, so God bless the staff that put up with me. But, the season that I kind of feel like I'm in right now is to remind myself, remind my colleagues, remind you all on this call that we are government employees. Like, most of us are all government employees. And I think we forget that sometimes. And I think that if you look around us right now, socially and culturally, there's just this very kind of anti-government movement, regardless of the side of the coin that you look at. There's this kind of extreme reaction and response right now culturally that we are all against the government. And in some ways, my radical self has no issue with that. I definitely feel like those of us that are descendants of African and Native Indigenous Americans are continuing to push up against a systemic attempt at annihilation and genocide. Yet at the same time, we forget that we are so blessed and that we have a consistent income, and that income pays our bills, and that income comes from the taxpayers that we serve. And so we have a job to do, and it's incredibly important that we do not absolve or abdicate ourselves of our responsibility, the stewards that we are, the gatekeepers that we are, and that we do allow ourselves that grace and compassion, but that, like Ellen said, it doesn't turn into that toxic positivity, as if we just thank you for being here. And I remember feeling like that as a teacher. Like, I didn't like my fellow teachers that, you know, had this bizarre missionary mentality where they just blessed the children for writing their name at the top of their page. That's not what we're here for. You know, so there's this moment that you spend, right, this quick second where you do acknowledge a survival that we've all had through this health and, you know, racial and cultural pandemic, insurrections, and all the other things that have come with it. But then we've got work to do. We've got the most work to do. Those of us that have been in education, social, all of this work, guess what? We are about to launch the hardest work we've ever done in our professional careers. The level of heavy lifting is going to be more than we've ever experienced before. So we don't have time to lick our wounds, right? Like, we need to be able to address and acknowledge the fact that we have gotten this far. Thank you. Seeing each other in person. Oh my God, I'm so glad you're alive. I stood in a hospital room and lost a loved one to COVID and watched him take his last breath. And I will never be the same. And I will be so thankful for every man, woman, and child that walks in the doors of this space and place that has survived this the last 2 years. But we have work to do. And that collective purpose and that mutual accountability is going to give us life. Because if we spend too much just marinating on the chaos that we've all lived through, we aren't going to be able to kind of put our money where our mouth is and get the outcomes that we need to get. So looking for that mutual accountability is critical in my mind to the teamwork that has to be done.
Sorry, Carl, you got to follow that.
You know, what to say, you know, I'm a recovering high school English teacher, right? So I see metaphors and everything. And I recently saw an image of a sailboat in the fog out in the ocean, kind of heeling or leaning on the side, but not tipping over. And a friend told me that they don't tip over because they got this keel or ballast or weight beneath it. So those crosswinds, right? The pandemic, racial injustice, political division, you know, environmental concerns. Right here, you know, sometimes the ballast are our words too, right? And the heart we bring to our work. And we, as, you know, educators and leaders, and the MDE reps here, and Amanda, your work at the county, all of us together, I think, are that weight. I think that I'm hopeful that will keep our boat from tipping over and keep us going forward. So I just really appreciate everything that was said, and agree with it and support it, and I'm inspired by it. And you know, I'm hopeful that schools are intensely emotional places, and we've experienced a lot of anxiety and stress and frustration and fear. I'm hopeful, maybe deliberately optimistic, that in the year ahead, that our schools community will again find like real joy, because I think we're more likely to find that joy in person together, working toward a shared purpose, than anywhere else. So.
Well, Carl, you totally anticipated my next question, which is, as we wrap up, what do you look forward to? What are your hopes for this year? So, Carl, you get a pass because you answered this already. Ellen, do you want to go?
Sure. I think something I'm looking forward to is the idea of we're going to go forward. Like, we can't go backwards. We can't go back to pre-March 2020. We can't go back to a time before George Floyd was murdered in our city. We can't go back to a time. I just think that our staff, those of our staff that have experienced a lot of privilege in their lives, have seen things that they can't unsee now. And I hope that it brings that mutual accountability that Mari was talking about. And the same thing about, you know, the pandemic laid so many inequities bare for the world to see, things that people had experienced and felt firsthand, and then others had been protected from, frankly. And so I hope in returning together, we know that, yeah, we can only go forward. We can't go back. There are things that we've learned, and then we have a responsibility to put those into practice through our actions, our words every single day. And so I'm looking forward to growth on our team, because I know that that will better serve our students and families and allow us to live into the mission and vision and goals that we have, but in a way that is collaborative with community and isn't something that's done onto families. It's done with, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to growth and going forward together.
Thanks. Tanya?
I'm looking forward in our district. Like I said, we serve setting for special education students. And one of the things that I always really was, very passionate about is really getting kids into less restrictive settings. So I'm hopeful that people are focused, kind of as Mari said, about what we're here to do, the work that we're all here to do this year. Our numbers were starting to go up, and I hope that they continue to go up. To me, it is not where kids should remain. And I hope that we can work together collaboratively to really open up the windows and doors of opportunities for our students so that they have solid post-secondary plans, coming from a setting where in the past, years and years ago, that wasn't always the case for students with disabilities. So my hope is that we do better by them, as well as our area learning center students, to help them have a future and a hope. So that's me.
Thanks, Tanya. All right, Mari, take us out. What's your hope for this year?
Ancient civilization tells us that we do better together, and I know that gets hashtagged and maybe loses its feel. But I am very hopeful that we can prove that right this year, and that by being together and being fully and authentically together in person as much as possible, fingers crossed, that we can heal and we can help lead that healing in every path that we're walking.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists, and thank you to all of the comments in the chat. I appreciate that. And Stacy, I believe you're going to close us out.
Yep. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you everyone for joining. As I mentioned, this webinar will be recorded and we'll email it out to everybody along with the resources mentioned earlier by MDE. CEUs will also be emailed out. There's just going to be a brief evaluation survey when the Zoom closes. So if you could just take a moment to give us some feedback, we'd appreciate it. And then just a plug to please join us for next week, part 2 of the Be at School conference. We'll have presentations from Brandon Jones from MACME, and then Judy Brown, the program manager at Minneapolis Public Schools Mental Health Support Services Manager, just to hear more about resources and tools to help you for the next school year. The registration is in the chat. So thanks again, everybody.